streaming strategy ahead of the highly anticipated launch of Disney+. But what does this new move mean for the rest of the players out there in content business? Well, joining us to discuss, WinView Executive Chairman, former TiVo CEO, and NBC Cable President. You got a lot of things before your name there, Tom.
Well,
we got to edit that down, I think.
most important is CNBC contributor. That's the one. That's the one that matters.
And you know what? As that, in fact, a couple of weeks back, you made a point about Hulu and operational control and talked about, given your experience, all the different contracts you assumed were in place that would give Comcast the ability to thwart any plans that Disney had. Seems you were right. Now they've got that operational control. How important is that for them?
Well, it's pretty important. I don't think Disney is quite yet the mouse that roared, but it's getting closer to that in the streaming world. This was vitally important to them. The rest of the world was not very focused on those issues, but Disney was clearly very focused on it. And as you say, it was because Comcast clearly had its hand on Disney's throat in terms of globalizing Hulu, and that was a key to really making the whole streaming apparatus transformation come into place. The question I have is, why did Comcast do this deal now? Brian and Steve are masters of negotiating leverage, and I think their leverage would have only increased 6 months, 12 months, 18 months from now in terms of Disney having to do this deal. Comcast got a fine deal, perfectly good deal. Hats off to Kevin Mayer for getting this deal done quickly. But it's a little curious to me that as Comcast's leverage would have increased over time, that they did this deal so quickly. Obviously, for Disney, it unleashes their ability to be a much bigger player.
To take Hulu internationally, to share ad sales technology across the platforms, data sharing, so many different things.
Bundling ESPN Plus and Disney Plus, which was critical, and I don't think they could have done it without.
Right. So it does give them that flexibility that conceivably will add only to the growth profile of Hulu. You could make one argument, well, the sooner we start with Disney here in terms of doing the deal, the more we can hope that value accretes to Hulu over time, helping us at the end.
Yes, and Comcast got a very good deal in that respect. I mean, they have Disney, who has to invest heavily in this now, more heavily because they'll be able to globalize it. And probably the most important provision of this deal is that Comcast can't be diluted below 21%, meaning there's going to be an enormous amount of Disney investment that they will benefit from, that they can't be further diluted than that. So it's a very good deal for Comcast in that respect. But Comcast had really blown a hole in Disney's globalization strategy by taking Sky. Sky has the European rights to Disney and Fox programming. They had a further ability to restrain Disney in terms of any global ambitions with its hand on Hulu's throat, and they let it go. And this is speculation on my part. I have to believe there were some regulatory rumblings with Comcast just having gotten out of the consent decree that allowed them to have a vote in Hulu, that kind of unleashed them in certain respects. And it may have been that they felt that regulatory heat could come back if it was being alleged that somehow they were restraining Disney from being a full-fledged competitor to Netflix, and it just wasn't worth that hassle, so do the deal now instead of waiting.
What about, let's talk a bit out in the future now. 3 years hence, Comcast can pull its content, or a lot of it, from the Hulu platform as it develops its own streaming service beginning next year. Where are we going to be in terms of so many of these offerings where it would seem they're compelled to create only their own content, and as everybody else puts up their own walled garden with their content?
It's a great point, David, and this is where the Fox transaction really becomes important, because Disney clearly knew, Hulu case in point, that they were going to lose third-party content. And having the Fox content, particularly globally, was really, really important. Hulu doesn't have the global rights to the programming it gets. Its whole pitch to networks, programmers, was, hey, sell us your domestic rights and then make the best deal you can selling it off piecemeal globally. So Hulu's sitting there as a domestic service. The Fox deal becomes that much more important as it thinks about its global expansion. Now, having said that, remember, Fox pulled all its programming from Netflix in 2017. And what happened? It didn't inhibit Netflix growth at all. It didn't accelerate Hulu's growth at all. So you can't overestimate the value of any single library. But this transaction with Fox becomes that much more important as Hulu will globalize.
On Netflix, you know, it's upfront week, and I've seen some projections on the number of shows they are slated to produce in the next few years. You're talking 4 digits. Is that even possible? Can you do that?
Well, you know, the hit rate that Netflix has had as a newcomer to this is astonishing. And anybody in the network television business 10 years ago, if you told them that they were producing the number of shows they'd say it's all going to be crap, none of it's going to get watched, and obviously that isn't the case. Clearly, you begin to strain creative talent out there, but we haven't hit that point yet. And I think Netflix's model in terms of how it's been able to be creative in foreign markets and bring great international series back into the U.S. is part of why this is a global game, part of why Hulu needed to get into a global game, part of making a programming model and getting creative talent from around the world contributing is so important.
CNBC contributor Tom Rogers, thank you.
I like that one. I like that.